Hey guys, welcome back to World of Warships. Today we're taking a look at the Utrecht with the new special Dutch commander. If this ship wasn't already toxic enough, what if we buffed it even further? You want a third airstrike? Just use this special commander. Would you like up to 6% more DPM on your main guns and your airstrikes in the form of alpha damage? You got it! Also, would you like an even faster reload on Witherer? 10% on your main guns, 15% on your airstrike? You got it with this commander. This is kind of wild. I think this ship with this commander is going to be one of the worst possible ships to fight against, outside of subs and carriers. Surface ships, though, this will be miserable. Here we're even divved with Malta in another one. I'm sorry. This is pretty bad. Perhaps Hildebrand gives a run for its money. I think that also is a pretty rough experience to fight against. The way Wargaming is stewarding this game, man, it is questionable to say the least. But how can you get this commander? Well, of course, it's in a collection, and you have to get yourself some of these loot boxes. And there's duplicates, unfortunately. So it's a 60 puzzle piece collection, much like Lisboa. This time, though, the duplicates are 2 to 1 rather than 3 to 1. So maybe it's a little bit easier. Although I think if you get unlucky, you still won't actually be able to get this commander for free, at least in this first go around of these loot boxes. Which sucks. It really does. And you'll have to choose between the commander and Taihong if you want one of those for free. Taihong is guaranteed if you are willing to spend coal, credits, and free XP, I think was the 3, to get enough tokens to get Taihong. Where this commander, not necessarily guaranteed, unfortunately. I miss the good old days, guys, where we had the commanders in the campaigns section. Remember those? It's been years since Wargaming's done anything there. Unfortunately, we had Halsey in there. We had Yamamoto in there. It was cool. It was like the original version of Dockyards where you didn't have to pay to get into it. There was no time-gated event there. You just ground it out at your own pace. A very different time for World of Warships, unfortunately. But as for the buffs on this ship, they are very strong. But they don't necessarily impact the early game. That's the key here with all of these special commanders. For the most part, they are buffs you earn over time in the game. And if you're wanting that extra airstrike, which is pretty wild, considering things like the Howden Legendary upgrade gives you that third airstrike on that ship, which then you can get up to 4 with this special commander, by the way. It requires you to land 50 bomb hits, which isn't so bad, but it still will take you some time. And that's not helping out your DPM. That's just earning more alpha damage, potentially, that you can save up, which is still very, very strong. But if you're in a situation like this one, or many other games with this 14-kilometer airstrike, you won't necessarily be benefiting from that extra airstrike if you're on cooldown using these airstrikes. It's more for when you're traversing the map, or there's a bit of a lull in the action. There we go, 50,000 damage achieved, and now we have a nearly 2% alpha damage buff to our ship. Every time you hit a threshold of 50,000 damage, so 50,000, 100,000, 150,000, you get a further nearly 2%. It's 1.97. I wonder if it's multiplicative instead of additive. It maxes out at 6% after those 3 stacks of it, though, which is a pretty nice buff, just straight up 6% alpha damage. For a ship with relatively low HE alpha, pretty solid AP alpha damage, and these airstrikes, that is a very, very nice thing to have. This HE, of course, is weak only in alpha damage. The shell velocity you're seeing, the range you're seeing here, as well as the pen, 32 millimeters of pen, remember, on Utrecht, means that it's relatively consistent with this ship compared to a lot of other light cruisers like Jinan, for example, playing that one recently with its alpha damage buff, which makes it very powerful as well. It does not have this shell velocity, though. That is immediately noticed when I was playing Jinan. It was a lot harder to lead targets, whereas with this ship, it's pretty easy to hit outside of 16 kilometers on a lot of these battleships. We do have to be careful though, relatively squishy ship and all. Played a little overly aggressive and lost a lot of HP for that. But these airstrikes, man, you just dump them on any ship around these islands. And on a map like Two Brothers, I mean, this is more about Utrecht than the Special Commander, I suppose, but look at my range, man. Like, the standard island over on the D cap there towards the middle between D and C, we're able to airstrike that. We're able to airstrike this Inchin here over on another common but aggressive island, and everything south of A cap. It is absurd what this ship can do. With a 30-second, sometimes sub 30-second reload like we have right now on these airstrikes. It's too much. It really is just too much with this ship. I hadn't played it for a while, so you're going to have to excuse some of the missed airstrikes. They are a small box, to be fair, and it does take some skill to lead these. It is not just point and click. But once you get onto it, and especially against some of these battleships, I mean, poor Montana being such an old battleship, it's got like a 22-second rudder shift, nearly double the time to move its rudder than for these airstrikes to be landing on the ship from the point that we click. It's crazy. So Special Commander here, maybe not as impactful as, say, Kuznetsov, where in almost every match that you're about to die, you get a damage control and a heal, and a nerf to the enemy ship's dispersion against you. That's very impactful. I think something like this is going to be a little bit easier to proc than, say, Halsey's Confederate. At least some of these upgrades. Certainly this 50,000 damage for more alpha damage thing is very, very simple to actually activate on this ship. And with something like a Tromp, for example, given the speed of that reload, but more importantly, the sheer number of bombs, I think you'll very quickly farm up an extra Alpha Strike. Whether those are, or sorry, Airstrike, an extra charge of the Airstrike there. Whether or not that's useful depends on the game, right? As we've already talked about, it depends on if you're going to actually be charging them up or just using them on cooldown. Here's a great example of the power of this ship, even while we're not fully charging them all up. The key is that we're still on the reload. We had 2 airstrikes charged there for a little while, but we were still reloading. That's maybe the best part of it. It allows you to continually use the DPM here. There's no downtime on reloading these extra airstrikes. So even though we didn't have 3 fully charged, it still feels like to this Montana that he just got struck 3 times over and over and over again. It is not fun to fight against this, I can tell you that. And I'm very worried about next update once more people have this ship. Of course, Utrecht is still in early access, so it's going to be next update when you can actually grind these out, 14.2. And by then, I'm sure a lot of you will have got this Special Commander too. Not looking forward to playing against that, to be honest with you. And if you had any concerns about, 9,000 damage there. Poor guy, man. Poor Montana. Trying to play his ship from 2015. Feels bad. 143,000 damage. Maybe not the most impressive, but still a nice example of the just sheer power of camping an island and striking people. 75k damage from just these bombs alone. They do pen, what, 34 millimeters of armor? Something like that. The key threshold being 32 millimeters, of course. Next map here, we have a very aggressive island that we can get to that allows us to strike well into the enemy spawn purely without risking our ship once we get up to this island. It is absolutely incredible here. We're going to dump both on the Suzuma, and I think he might actually avoid this, but that's okay. We will reload in, what, 25 seconds for one of our strikes? So he's in the corner of the box, right? We should miss a lot of that. Oh, we still get 11,000 damage in a fire. It's a lot. It is a lot to deal with these things. I'm very saddened that Wargaming went with this route for the Special Commander. Much like the Howden Legendary upgrade, I'm very disappointed that Wargaming decided to buff the most frustrating, the more toxic element of the ship, the least fun to fight against element of these ships, with the special upgrade on the Howden and the Special Commander here. Yes, it will also buff your main gun reload, your main gun alpha damage, But let's be honest, it's really all about these airstrikes here. Certainly with the Howden legendary upgrade, it feels weird to me that they would give such a crazy gimmick like this and then also have the special ability, the special commander, also massively buff your potential output with that. I suppose it is, in a certain sense, it makes sense. It's leaning into the gimmick of the line, and so they would want some cohesion in that regard. But from a gameplay perspective, it's so sad to me that the least fun element to fight is what gets buffed here. So it's making it even worse to deal with these ships. And for those of you that have been playing the Archveld over the last few weeks here, or as you've gotten it from the Battle Pass last update, the bombs may look similar, but it's important to remember that Utrecht gets a whole nother plane, so you're not as worried about a single plane loss. It's not as impactful to your bomb damage output from your airstrike. It's not as vulnerable to getting 1 or 2 planes shot down, massively reducing your damage. The other thing about Utrecht is you have more bombs per plane. So in the same drop reticle, you're just having more density as well. Utrecht planes are much better. These airstrikes are much better than the tier 8 and 9. Even when it comes to range, but also when it comes to the consistency when you're landing bombs inside that drop pattern. So pretty wild ship to be receiving these buffs here. And in this game, yeah, they are definitely running away from us with good reason. This poor Tirpitz won't be leaving our range for a very, very long time. Georgia, though, with its engine boost, yes, we are going to miss both of those airstrikes, unfortunately. And there's actually going to be a Thunderer that we're going to be dropping, which is an ideal target, of course, when it comes to the pen on these airstrikes. But Thunderer has really good rudder shift. If you didn't know about that one, it is like it has the legendary upgrade for Conqueror built in. And I'm going to miss this Thunderer here quite a lot, which it could be down to just not having as much experience in these ships again. It's been a little while since those initial early access videos. But it also, I think, comes down to trying to hit targets with these small drop boxes, which have really quick maneuverability, whether it's acceleration or, more importantly, acceleration and rudder shift. You can't avoid these. So it's not quite as bad as carriers, I don't think. It's still no fun to fight against, to be honest. It's really miserable. I would recommend just running from these. That is, unfortunately, the counterplay. You run away and hope that this guy playing the Utrecht or whatever airstrike ship he's playing makes a mistake and gets taken out. It's quite unfortunate, but that does seem to be the direction Wargaming is leaning in. More gimmicks, more abilities that really punish people for getting caught within their range. And as a result, I think a lot of people are just going to camp even more. This problem of passive meta and getting killed so quickly the instant you misplay or are spotted and killed very quickly before you can even get to a strong island position in your cruiser, for example. It's just going to get worse, unfortunately. The waterline certainly didn't make me more hopeful for the outlook of this game. It just reinforced the direction that Wargaming has been trending in over the past year or so, or maybe more, I guess. And this commander is certainly in that direction. Is it stronger than some of the other commanders? Maybe not. Maybe not as strong as Kuznetsov. Maybe not as strong as Halsey. I mean, 20% reload on a Confederate or 6% extra alpha damage when you get 150,000 damage plus 10% reload on a Witherer. I mean, that's pretty close, right? It's 15% airstrike cooldown on a Witherer. I did not actually manage to proc the Witherer achievement, though, in recording for this video. I'll have to try again some more. But I feel bad playing this, to be honest with you. I feel bad. It's funny to play for a bit, just with how insane it is. But at a certain point, it's like, I feel bad. There's not a lot of counterplay here. I was just clicking on people, especially once I figured out the aim and was getting consistent drops in on people, which I didn't quite get to all the time. But it feels bad to be clicking on people like this, and they're not spotting me. I'm not shooting my gun, so I'm not even getting spotted while dropping these strikes. You know, I could even sit open water and be spotting for myself, given how powerful the concealment is here on the Utrecht, and then just drop them, and I never get spotted anyway. It's not a great mechanic, obviously, as you can tell. I'm really not a fan. As for if you should go for the Commander or the Taihang, I think it really comes down to, are you playing these Dutch ships a lot? Are you going to be enjoying these airstrikes and the power from it? Or are you looking for a premium that can grind you some credits? I think that's really the choice for you. If you already have a bunch of premiums, Taihang isn't the most ground-breaking premium in the game, and certainly if you're not interested in battleships really at all, then, I mean, you probably don't need to really go for the Taihang, right? And something I haven't really mentioned yet, but if you're interested in the non-airstrike Dutch ships, right? Like maybe you're playing the Groningen and you're farming up battleships, you're getting Witherers, you're dealing a lot of damage. This is a pretty cool commander as well. I've focused on the negative, certainly, when it comes to this commander and this ship, the Utrecht here, with these airstrikes. But this commander on one of those really fast reloading destroyers like Groningen, really good at farming battleships, farming Witherers, you'll get that 10% reload quite often, I think, as well as just getting that permanent 6% extra damage output on 150,000 damage. That's a pretty good buff for that destroyer and should be pretty fun to use. So another good reason to get this ship is it can be used on multiple classes. It isn't just an airstrike benefit. It is good for airstrikes. I mean, this poor Hindenburg, right? 12,000 damage. There I finally get the number of airstrikes achievement up to 3 there now. Took me a while this game, right? Took me over 10 minutes in this game to get it. And this one, obviously, not going to end in our victory, but we'll try and make a decent last stand, up to nearly 200,000 damage. We've had that 6% buff for a little while now, and it is very, very useful. Dealing with this Hindenburg here, obviously trying to isolate 1v1s in these later game scenarios when you need to spot for yourself, trading damage, trading HP for that extra spotting can work out in these situations. C-cap, getting capped though right now. It's important to have situational awareness. And at this point, I think that is the Thunderer. So we want to be pushing forward. We don't want to get caught broadside at close range to a Thunderer. And the Eugen is here to come torp us. Hopefully we can turn in and get some maneuvering going. Our speed boost is about to come up. And it turns out this island extends like 2 ship widths. 2 of my ship widths, maybe, out to the left. Was not expecting that. I suppose I should have. Wargaming has not done a great job of visually showing you where the island starts. Unfortunately. Maybe they can look at that this year, right? They talked about map reworks in the footnote of the waterline. So it is of low priority, but maybe it'll come. EP damage looking pretty spicy. Another airstrike in on the Eugen. Can I take him out here? One final burst before we die. And that's our last reload. Not quite able to take him out, but 230,000 damage. Not too bad, not too bad. It's a strong ship, obviously. It's an overpowered ship. It's a ship that I'm going to be, well, not having fun fighting against, right? I think that's the best way I can put it. And this commander will be buffing it even further. So maybe I'll have to try it out on some of the destroyers, the ones that don't have airstrikes, and see maybe it's also impactful there, which I would like to have as well. Not just an airstrike commander, but that is the immediate thought, right? How busted can this thing be on the Utrecht? It's pretty good, as it turns out, but whether or not it's so broken and so overpowered is unsure. I'm unsure on that, just because this ship is so crazy base. That is this commander really making that much difference to this ship? I don't know. It is very, very good though. It is activated later in the game. This one is pretty wild to just get a nearly 2% buff every 50,000 damage, up to 3 times. That's pretty good. Minor, but very easily accessible on a lot of these Dutch ships. The extra airstrike doesn't really help your DPM if you're in a situation like I often am with this one. I mean, you have 14-kilometer airstrikes. Like, you're often within range of someone to drop on cooldown, so it's not helping you in those situations. You have to wait quite a while for this to really help you out. And Witherer, I didn't manage to proc while recording for this, but I imagine that would also be pretty insane here, given that we have a 30-second reload, 15%. It'll be pretty good on regular destroyers too. I think seeing what it's like on something like the Groningen here would be pretty cool as well, and less airstrike focused. It's still going to be good on those ships for that extra boost, that extra 6%, and possibly the 10% reload there on a Witherer. Certainly, Groningen very good at farming those Witherers. Great on Howden as well. 4 airstrikes potentially. It's silly to think about. Whether or not that is as game-breaking, I don't know. I think the key with Howden is that with your legendary upgrade there, you're getting those 3 airstrikes from the start, which means that initial travel time to your island position, that first couple minutes of the game, you're able to charge up 3 without really any downside, right? You need a lull later on to make use of that 4th, if you are able to proc it on the Howden with legendary upgrade, or the 3rd here on the Utrecht. As for getting this commander, well, it's tokens, it's in the armory, it's these crates right here. Finest hour crates is what you need, and each one of these will drop a single finest hour collection. You can get duplicates though, so that is the concern here, obviously. And when it comes to those crates, you have 84 potentially. You're not guaranteed to get the commander with that many. So then you're going to have to buy some. And that sucks if you want the commander guaranteed. At least with these, I think it drops 2, potentially D7. Oh, they're gambling the dockyard ship? Oh, I didn't look into that. Wargaming. Okay, try to find the positive. It's hard right now, guys. It's hard. Wow. Okay. That'll be a different video, I guess. We'll talk about that one next week, I guess. Oh, man. Okay. Well, there's my reaction live to that, apparently. What's the drop rate? 1%. Okay, no, I'll figure this out later. We're talking about this collection. You at least get 2 of those guaranteed from those premium crates. So hopefully you can get it with the free crates if you're doing that entire campaign. Keep in mind, you won't be able to get both that Tai Hang as well as the commander. So you kind of have to choose one or the other. And the duplicates are at least 2, right? It's 2 to 1 if you're wanting to convert duplicates into one of these puzzle pieces. Here we can see with Lisboa, it was a 3 to 1. So much worse. That's better, I suppose, but whether or not you'll be lucky or, let's say, unlucky enough to not get this while grinding through all of those tokens, we'll see. We'll see how it goes. But that is the new special commander. Pretty wild on a ship like Utrecht, but maybe that's more down to Utrecht being so busted and less about the commander. I'll leave that up to you guys, and I'm sure we'll see over the next few months just how wild this stuff is. Or maybe it's fine. Perhaps it's not a big deal at all, given what they're about to introduce in 14.2 with those temporary ships with insane bonuses. Oh man, 2025 is going to be interesting. Thank you very much for watching, and have a great rest of your day.